Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the final super session of this year's T&D Conference and Exhibition. Has it been a great program or what? Woo! It's always difficult to go last, but as they say in baseball terms, this is going to be a great closer. We have a great panel lined up for you this afternoon with so many exciting things happening in the electric power industry. We have a lot to talk about and certainly want to hear from all of you as well. My name is Wayne Bishop, and I have the honor of moderating today's panel. I am a member of the local organizing committee for this week. Most recently, I finished up my term as VP of Meetings and Conferences, but this week took 2 years to plan. Let's give the local organizing committee another big round of applause for a job well done. My day job is I serve as Vice President at Quanta Technology. The format for today's panel will be that each panelist is going to give a 10-minute presentation, sort of a TED Talk, to dive a little bit deep on some of the topics. And then after all panelists have presented, we'll have the Q&A. So without any further ado, let me introduce our first panelist. We working here? That's me. Here we go. All right, technology works. Unlike what some of you experienced at the Hilton this morning, I hear. Our first panelist is Catherine Stempien. Catherine is a fellow New Englander. I hope a Red Sox fan. I forgot to ask you that, I think.
We're going baseball.
Okay, we got a lot to talk about. All right. So she is the president and CEO of Avangrid. And this is actually Catherine's first time speaking at an IEEE Power and Energy Society event. So please join me now in giving a warm welcome to Catherine Stempien.
Thank you very much, and I'm very excited to be here. Not so excited to be on the last panel, but we still see people coming in, so plenty of seats. We thought maybe we would do some transformer work at other hotels so that people would be forced to have the air conditioning here so that they'd show up. But nevertheless, happy to be here. And my name is Catherine Stempien. I am President and CEO of Avangrid Networks. For those of you who don't know, Avangrid Networks is, I own and operate 8 gas and electric utilities in the Northeast. And I have some members of my team sitting in the audience, so I really needed some more hype team, so they agreed to come and hype up. See? So I think this panel will be interesting. We all got together a little bit at lunch beforehand, and even though we have kind of different areas or segments that we sit in, it's remarkable the commonality of the issues that we're seeing and the challenges that we need to cover. And I think that that is a good intro because I don't think anything that we're going to say here is stuff that you all don't know, or you all haven't experienced, or you haven't heard already this conference, or you haven't been discussing with friends. But hopefully we'll have some good dialogue and maybe show at least a few good pictures or such. So when we talked about what this panel was going to be on, Wayne said, well, climate change impacts on the grid of tomorrow. And I took a look at that and I said, tomorrow? Like, I'm facing grid impacts today. And I know that a lot of you have seen in the news all of the weather that we're seeing. I mean, here we are on the West Coast with climate impacts according to wildfire. If you talk to S&P, they will tell you their #1 risk that they have set for utilities is wildfire risk. We also know that there's a lot of flooding. When it's not raining, I mean, when it's not burning down, it's raining. So we have tremendous flooding risk, things that we haven't seen before. I talk about one of my service territories is Maine, and we've had 300-year floods in the span of 6 weeks. Maybe it's not a 100-year flood occurrence anymore. Of course, all of those systems, all that wind, even if it's not rain, the wind and the ice and all of that water is causing impacts on just the basics of the grid. So that asset management, it's really failing faster. Things are getting weaker. let alone we used to just worry about trees. Now we're worried even more about trees and that increasing wind and those impacts. And of course, customers, right? Customers are becoming more and more dependent on the product that we deliver. They're also becoming a little less tolerant of outages because they're more dependent on their everyday lives. And as we see more electrification coming, that's just going to increase. So they have increasing demands on when is my power going to get restored. So we've got to think differently as an industry and figure out how we're going to do this. So I thought I would start with just a little bit of a case study. This is Central Maine Power. This is a storm that we had in December. And so you can see the pictures, right? Lots of damage occurred. It was actually the highest impacted storm we'd ever seen on our system. People at CMP like to talk about the ice storm of 1998 and how that took over 3 weeks to restore power and the significant impacts it had. Well, this had more outages, more damage, 1,100 broken poles. We had 25,000 calls taken at the contact center. We had transmission line outages in addition to all of the distribution line. Thousands of trees. Our crews were doing make ready all the time, trying to help clear roads. We had raining where it used to snow. So instead of snow coming down and having an ice problem, you had a tremendous amount of rain that came in and flooded out substations. What did we do? Knowing that our customers expect that perfect power, we enabled our crews, 1,531 line crews and 511 tree crews just to get the power back on. Internal employees, of course, rallied to the call in order to get it on, and we ended up restoring power in 6 days. On Christmas Eve was when the last of our customers came on. So significant event in order to respond to this. Can we do this time and time again? Can my customers afford to have 1,500 line crews multiple times during a season in order to get their power on in 6 days? I'd say it's a little untenable. So what are we doing? Well, we've got a plan for a couple of things. Capacity, we talked about increasing electrification. We've got significant capacity needs in parts of the system, parts of my system and parts of the system across the country. We talked about the growth in data centers and what that is driving in terms of new load. I can't even deal with existing load. I've got circuits in the state of New York and upstate where if 2 customers want to have an EV charger in their house, my circuit's overloaded. So we got to figure out how to increase the capacity on the system, and then we got to figure out what we do for resiliency, how to make it last longer, be hardier. So, up here are just a couple of things. Again, you all have seen and heard about these things. There's nothing new that a lot of you all haven't been seeing in the past couple of years. How do we get more capacity? How do we shave off the peaks? How do we use energy efficiency, DERMS? How do we do microgrids? How are we implementing battery storage onto the grid in order to allow for more resiliency there? And then what are we doing in terms of resiliency? Some of it's just easy basics, blocking and tackling. I worked for Duke Energy for almost 20 years, and so I still have a house in Charlotte, North Carolina, and everybody in my neighborhood used to joke because although my neighborhood is right in a pretty urban area of Charlotte, I have 9-10 outages every year. And then when I left Duke, my neighbors saw increased outages, and they blamed it all that I was leaving. But it was because Duke had noticed a problem, and they were starting to actually rebuild their system. And over the winter, I was out on my back porch and I looked up and I saw this bright, kind of nice, thick conductor. And my family, who's used to their mom being in the industry that I'm in, I'm looking up, I'm like, look at that, guys. That's tree wire. And everyone's like, what is tree wire? I'm like, I'm telling you, this is gonna help the outages in the neighborhood. And guess what? Big outage. I was talking to somebody in a Charlotte, former colleague of mine, and he said 2-day outage in Charlotte. There were significant storms that occurred yesterday through Charlotte. My neighborhood had no outages. So it really does work, some of this blocking and tackling. Some of the automation that we're doing in order to have self-healing grids and in order to centralize the control of it. Vegetation management, whether or not it's now ground to sky clearing, which we're doing in Maine, whether it's furthering your rights of way. Maine is the most forested state in the entire lower 48. So we got lots of trees. And again, all of that wind is further putting at risk those trees. So other things we're doing. Here's another little bit of a case study. This is a substation in Connecticut. It had never, ever been subject to flooding before Hurricane Sandy, or Superstorm Sandy. In 2012, FEMA raised the 100-foot-year flood elevation by 3 feet, and now this substation was at serious risk. So we took the opportunity to move the substation and to make it more resilient by making it a gas-insulated substation, taking those opportunities to think differently. And that was a common theme among my co-panelists at lunch. We talked about having to think differently. Instead of taking my grid in New York and replacing it like for like, pole for pole, substation by substation, we've got to think differently. We've got to think about the topology of the grid. How can I think differently about this grid? How can I reduce substations, get to the same voltage, increase substation or some switching stations, and think differently? Now is the time, because we've got billions to spend, billions. And if we just keep doing the same thing over and over again, my customers aren't going to be able to pay for it. So as I kind of close, just a couple of things as we're thinking about those kind of new ways of thinking and innovative solutions. There were, I don't know how many people on the convention center floor and the exhibition hall looking and selling really interesting things. And we've got great partners here to help us with engineering services and contracting services and going out and fixing things and 1,500 line crews. But at the end of the day, there's so much that needs to be done. Everybody sees, wow, this is a great opportunity for companies, whether it's a utility, a technology company, great opportunities for all of us. It's all on the back of customers like mine. Customers like mine who are making $50,000 a year, who can't afford $2 billion worth of capital investment that I need to do year over year in order to make a resilient grid. So I constantly push my team, think differently, think smarter. How do we do more for less? How do we use technology, whether it's AI or data analytics, to better serve the system and to think a little bit differently? So nothing new, but just a little utility in the Northeast perspective. So I will turn it over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Catherine. Oh, I'll take that, Catherine. Thanks. Thank you so much, Catherine. Really appreciate your perspective. So today we have a great panel in terms of international perspectives, different backgrounds, and our next panelist is not a newbie, for sure, to IEEE PES, but one of the things I really appreciate about Dr. Michael Payson is that he's not one of these, if I can say it, bureaucratic DOE people. He actually worked at a utility for 20 years. In a utility, he's a PE, he has that practical experience. And so now, please join me in giving a warm IEEE welcome to Michael Payson.
Yeah, thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Wayne, for very nice words. And thank you for sticking with us till the last session. So I'm not going to start scaring you. I'm going to talk about what can we do to solve the problem. So if you turn on the news these days, everybody's trying to talk about the world is coming to the end. The global climate change, everything's changing. And it's like people admiring the problem. So I don't want to admire the problem. I want to try to find a way to solve it. And the reason we need to solve it because things are getting really, really bad, and they're not going to get any better unless we do something about this. So just some of the statistics. So power outages doubled over the past 2 decades, literally doubled. The total annual cost of outage to utility customers increased from about $55 billion from 2006 to 2019 to $480 billion during next end of the century for the close to the end of the century. So the power outages affect everything. So because right now, we're not only creating more renewable sources of energy, but we're also electrifying more and more loads. So there is more and more dependency for electricity. And if we don't have reliable and resilient grid, we're not going to be able to succeed in the decarbonization effort that this administration so strongly pursuing. So one of the things that we need to focus on is making sure that future grid can not only accommodate all the new types of resources, not can only support all new electric loads, but can also maintain its reliability. It has to be resilient. It also has to be secure, and it must be affordable, so everybody can afford it. But the climate change is throwing the wrench in all these efforts. So it affects pretty much everything in electric grid. So my Office of Electricity, we are focusing on T&D, on electricity delivery system. So everything from generator terminal to the load. It's transmission, distribution, microgrids, grid-scale storage, anything you can think of that goes into process of delivering electricity. But the climate change impacts every single aspect. So on generation side, we see decreasing availability of water that may affect generation of hydroelectricity. So we're going to lose one of the critical renewable resources. Transmission, as temperatures get warmer, the heat waves can reduce transmission capacity, and we already don't have enough transmission capacity. So we need to build not only new transmission, but increase capacity in existing transmission lines. And on distribution side, the heat waves and more frequent and intense wildfires, as we see, damage power lines and cause large wildfires that are affecting many people. So what are we doing? So the government is putting a lot of effort in addressing what we call grid modernization that can help to support grid against resiliency and at the same time help to decarbonize, integrate more renewables, and support more electrical loads. So we have a Resilient Communities Initiative. We invested $11 billion in grants to help states, tribes, utilities to enhance the resilience of power sector infrastructure against extreme weather events, but also cyber attacks. We also have new transmission facilitation program. It's $2.5 billion. Again, those are all B with billions. And it's under what we call Build a Better Grid initiative. We're developing nationally significant transmission lines. We increase resilience by connecting regions of the country and improving access to cheaper energy sources. So all this new renewable generation that comes online, it's not necessarily co-located with load centers. So you need to bring it back to the load centers. For that, you need new transmission capacity. And new transmission capacity, if you only wait to build new transmission lines, it will take 4, 5, 6, 10 years. So we're exploring many innovative ways to increase capacity in existing right-of-ways to deliver this clean energy from where it's produced to where it can be consumed. And also, in order to decarbonize, you can't just rely on renewable energy. You can't decarbonize electric grid without nuclear. So we invest in $6 billion in strategic investment to help preserve existing US reactor fleet. And we're saving thousands of high-paying jobs across the country to keep this emission-free resource available and running. Hydropower, it's another renewable source. So there's $700 million being allocated by administration to improve efficiency and maintain dam safety, reduce environmental impacts, and ensure that generators continue to produce emission-free electricity from all these existing hydro generation resources. And then, as you get more and more renewables online, your solar and wind are very different from your traditional generation that used rotating machinery. So not only you can't fully dispatch this generation, we're also losing inertia. So you need to substitute inertia for something else, and you need to accommodate this intermittency so you can maintain the reliability of the system. That requires grid flexibility. So we're investing $3 billion for deployment technologies that improve grid flexibility. So some of those things like energy storage, we're putting a lot of innovative technologies. We're doing R&D, we're deploying them, we're helping industry to deploy, we're supporting some of the projects with financing, with long guarantees. And when I say energy storage, I don't necessarily mean batteries. So there's many different technologies of energy storage that can support electric grid, and they contribute to both reliability and resilience. So what are we doing specifically at our Office of Electricity? So one of the things we developed in the last several years, we call it NAR. It's North American Energy Resiliency Model. What this model does, it incorporates all relevant assets of the integrated electricity grid across the entire North America, all interconnected grid that includes United States, Canada, and small part of Mexico. And this model, it identifies potential infrastructure investment to improve resiliency and mitigate risks associated with energy interdependencies. Because electric grid is dependent on other infrastructures. So natural gas is one good example. So as we get more and more natural gas into the system, the interdependency between natural gas and electricity is growing. So we need to understand how threats to one infrastructure affect another one. And this model allows you to do it, and it allows you to identify what are the right areas for investment to improve these infrastructures. So right now we have 3 infrastructures that are fully integrated in this model. It's electricity, gas, and communications, because so much of the operations of electric grid rely on communication system. And this system can help you rapidly predict consequences of known and emerging threats and for the entire infrastructure. And it helps you, again, prioritize your investments. And you can support very precise analysis of what the impact and what the investments need to be to mitigate these impacts. The other thing that we're doing is we recently announced what we call Pathway to Innovative Grid Liftoff. We identified the technologies that exist today, but they're not deployed at the scale that should be deployed. And these technologies can help to everything I just was talking about. Can help with integration of renewables, can help with supporting new electric loads, and can help with grid reliability and resilience. So some of the examples, if you go to DOE website, you will see a lot of details on that. But some of the things that we are working on, it goes through the entire system, entire electric grid. So everywhere where improvements can be made, we identified what are the low-hanging fruits that we can focus on. Those are not the only technologies that we're working on, but those are the ones that can be more immediately deployed, more immediately introduced to the utilities and support the reliability, resilience, security, and affordability. And the last thing, I always try to close on that. We love to talk about technology. So technology is something that everybody excited, and I always call myself a recovering engineer. So we love to talk about how technology can save the world. But if you don't have markets that can support adoption of this technology is not going to succeed. And in order for markets to succeed, you need to have policy that enables those markets. So this is why we're all working together across all the federal agencies, with utilities, with industry. And this is how we can succeed in our effort to make sure that the electric grid can support future goals of decarbonization, electrical loads, and maintain reliability, resilience, security, and be affordable at the same time. So thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it. Thank you very much, Michael. Much appreciated. Our next speaker is Ken Seiler. Ken is the Senior Vice President of Planning at PJM. Please join me now in giving a warm IEEE welcome to Ken Seiler.
Thank you.
All right, Ken.
Appreciate it. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you to all the diehards who hung in there to the very last here. So thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here today. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about us, for those who may not know what we do or where we are. We're up in the Mid-Atlantic. Our territory runs from Chicago over to New Jersey, down to the Outer Banks in North Carolina. We serve 65 million people in 13 states plus the District of Columbia. And what our role really is really in 3 key areas: regional planning, operations, and markets. So we plan the grid from 1 day out to 15 years. We operate the grid that we plan, and then we run various markets: capacity markets, energy markets, and ancillary markets that clear usually around $50 billion each and every year. So that's our primary focus. And the primary focus, quite frankly, when you boil all this down, is to integrate all this to keep the lights flowing for our 65 million people. When you look at some of the key trends, I'm going to hit some of the key trends, and you've heard this all week, I know, but let me just reiterate some of the things. We're seeing extreme load growth, 1.6% load growth, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot in a system our size, where our maximum load has historically been around 150,000 megawatts. So you're seeing significant load growth, primarily due to data centers that are very, very concentrated in primarily 3 key areas of our system: Washington, D.C., Columbus, Ohio, and Chicago area. Ton of load growth for many, many years, 10, 12 years. We had like a 0.1, 0.2% load growth. Now we're back up to where it was in the late 90s. So a lot of load growth, which means a lot of generation is needed in order to supply that load, which we'll get to in just a second. We're also seeing the fuel mix changes. We have over 250,000 megawatts on our queue. I'll talk more about that in a second. 95% of that is renewables, batteries, storage, batteries meaning storage, wind, and solar. Much more distributed. A lot of things looking at FERC Order 2222, where we're looking at things aggregating from the distribution system and rolling up onto the transmission system, which is having a major impact. One of the earlier speakers today talked about how the two-way flows on the distribution system are occurring in many areas, and that's going to continue. And the lines between transmission and distribution are going to continue to blur. Everything's kind of melting together at this point. State policies. We have 13 different states at District of Columbia. They all have different policies. We have 2 states who have 0 renewable portfolio goals. Everybody else has various renewable portfolio goals that make it a real challenge to coordinate 14 different jurisdictions and try to supply what their needs are, and many of them are very, very disparate. We have an aging workforce, and we have an aging infrastructure, right? So our bulk power transformer fleet is fairly young. About the average age on our 500 to 230s are about 10 years of age, believe it or not. We refreshed a lot of those transformers over the last several years. Our transmission system, though, is aging. 30% of that, over 26,000 miles, are over 50 years of age. Fortunately, it's been well designed and has stood the test of time for many, many years. And I know you heard this before, but my informal survey from talking to various OEMs and some of our transmission owners are indicating that the average time to receive a 500 kV breaker is anywhere between 4 to 6 years, and 500 to 230 kV transformers are 4 and 5 years, which are creating a real Achilles heel when we're looking at some of the expansion and low growth needs that we have. So those are some of the key trends. There's more, but just at a high level, in the sake of time. Some of our reliability concerns right now is to make sure that the generation we have available, the 200,000 megawatts total that we have available on our system, is going to run when we need it. What we've seen over the last several winter storms is the generation's not showing up when we need it. It's not available. They can't get fuel. They haven't done the winterization properly. Several other factors are involved. Resource adequacy is the next hurdle coming up, which we'll talk about in a little bit as well. In the next 3 years, we're going to have resource adequacy issues. The load's going up. We have 40,000 megawatts retiring off of our system. And we have some generators who are capacity resources today who have delisted off our system and strictly serving Bitcoin mining, strictly serving data centers. And these are baseload generation. And there's another 5,000 megawatts in queue to do the same thing. So that'll be 10,000 megawatts of baseload generation that's going to go away to serve Bitcoin mining and other needs. So resource adequacy is going to get real very quickly. We've been fortunate. We've been fat and happy, capacity rich for many, many years. Our day's coming here in the next several years. So it's going to get real quick. And then finally, some of the things that we talk about with some of our states and the federal government is around those NERC essential reliability services, those things we need around inertia, short circuit, some of the ramping capability, all those things that really keep the lights on at the end of the day. This is a little bit of a dated slide, but you can kind of see how we keep adjusting the load up each and every year. If you look at the 2024 data, that number has risen yet again. We're looking at adding 20,000 megawatts of new load to our system between now and 2030. Take a look at the forecasted retirements. You can see it's a mix of coal, natural gas, no surprise really to anybody, but a lot of it's due to policy decisions, and that's 40,000 megawatts we're going to pull off the system, or 21% of our total current generation. Let's get to the next slide. New entry. So let's talk about this one. So again, I mentioned earlier we have about 250,000 megawatts in the queue. We have 40,000 megawatts. Get this number, 40,000 megawatts today that have completed all the studies, that have completed all the agreements and contracts that are necessary to interconnect and are not building. So, me being concerned as I am, I called all my ISO and RTO brethren. I called California, I called Texas, I called MISO, SPP, New England, New York. My informal poll, and this is recent data, by the way, there's 260,000 megawatts in this nation right now, just within the ISOs. And there's some other data with Duke and Southern Company. I talked to them as well. There's 260,000 megawatts today that have completed all the studies, that are ready to interconnect with all the agreements, and have virtually zero cost to interconnect to the grid that aren't building. Zero cost. So the question is why? Columbia, Abe Silverman just did a study to find out why. Primarily, it's probably because the cost of capital, the interest rates are up, local opposition for solar farms, with some of the siting type of issues, as well as some of the supply chain things. And some people are not, they're developers, but they're not looking to own and operate, they're looking to flip the project. And they can't find anybody to buy the project. So our concern right now is we have all this generation we're studying, we're getting it through the queue, our transmission owners are working hard to get facilities built, to get ready, nothing's coming online. It's a major concern, especially when we're looking at 20,000 megawatts of load, minimum, by the way, between now and 2030. These are some projections that we're showing. We believe the range of new entry coming onto the system that's going to interconnect is going to be between 15 and 30,000 megawatts in the next several years. Interconnection process, we have taken a beating, a real hard beating by various people in the industry around why aren't we clearing this queue? We are clearing the queue, and we have a plan to do that. We filed, as of a couple years ago, we filed 2,147 pages for interconnection reforms. It was approved by FERC. Monumental task. Our staff did a fantastic job, and some of us are sitting right here, to make sure that we listened to people, what their needs were. We came up with a process. We tried to optimize the best across the globe and across all the other ISOs and RTOs. FERC approved it. We're likely need to get this system in place, and we have it in place. We're starting the process, and we'll optimize this over the next couple years. This is the timeline, 40,000 megawatts, completed studies now. All the ISAs are signed. 26,000 megawatts will be cleared this year. Another 46,000 will be cleared between the end of the year and the middle of next year. And you can see the time frame. We're going to clear this 250,000 megawatts in the next couple of years. The studies will be completed. Whether people build, that's the question. Finally, I kind of paint a little bit of a ugly picture here with resource adequacy. With the load going up, generation retirements coming off the system, the resources that are coming online don't have the same capacity factor. If you look at like a solar farm, it might have a 38, 40% capacity factor compared to a gas plant. But these are all the things, and these are all the various initiatives that we're taking on right now in order to make sure that we can serve our system and our customers reliable within our footprint. And it spans across all aspects, markets, operations, and planning, in order to make sure, because there's no silver bullet here, folks, in any of this. It's going to require all these different elements. And one of the things we just announced today was an interregional planning effort with MISO. And the idea behind that is we have a lot of transfer capability with MISO, up over 20,000 megawatts of transfer capability today with MISO. During some of the winter storms, we could have exported more power into MISO had it not been for congestion inside of their system. So we're looking at additional transfer capability. Why? And it's going to be expensive. Why are we looking at it? Because it's absolutely critical that we can take advantage of the geographic diversity that we have within the Eastern Interconnection so that we can lean on our neighbors when we're in a cold winter morning, we're ramping 10, 12, 15,000 megawatts in an hour on the cold weather pickup when it's 5 degrees outside. We need to be able to lean on our neighbors to the south and to our west and maybe even to our north to try to import more power into our system, and then vice versa, since we're all this great interconnected Eastern interconnection. So it's absolutely critical. I list some of the things there. Winter Storm Elliott was a major concern for us. We were close to dropping load. We had about, 50, 60 different lessons learned from that we are now integrating into some of our operations and planning. So a lot of things going on. Policy is another one that takes major precedent right now because it's having an impact. Before additional policies are made, we need to understand what is the impact of those policies on the electric reliability of the grid, because if the lights go out, nothing else matters. The whole world kind of stops at that point. So we've got to be very careful as we go through this energy transition. Finally, some of the key takeaways. We need to avoid policies that push generation off the system before new generation's available. That's a major concern. Some of the state and local challenges around siting is also a challenge for many of our developers and some of our transmission owners as well. And we need to continue to evolve, and we need to bring in some of the best and brightest. We've hired some brilliant, really smart young people, some of them which are in the room here, and they've done a tremendous job under tremendous pressure to get studies done and get things out the door in order to be responsive to how the system continues to change. So a lot of changes occurring. You've heard about a lot of those this week. We need to continue to respond and grow. As Catherine said, think outside the box a little bit and do some other things here. So I'll save some of my other comments for later on when we get into the dialogue, but that's it for me, and thank you.
Thank you, Ken. Thanks, Ken. Appreciate it. Thanks very much, Ken. Much appreciated for your insight. Our next speaker, I actually met last year. We were on a panel together for another IEEE conference in Istanbul, Turkey. It was our GTD Asia conference, and Steve and I met, and I could tell right from the start that Steve was very passionate about climate change, because one of his slides read, and I'll date myself a little bit when I say this, that former President Clinton, when he was running for office, said, "It's the economy, stupid," right? Many of us remember that in the audience. Well, Steve had a slide up that said, "It's climate change, stupid." And to Catherine's point, it's not about tomorrow, it's really about today that we need to talk about, that it is really affecting our grid today. Steve is a regulatory economist with 30 years of experience in the Australian energy sector as a regulator and a consultant. So again, keeping with the theme of international perspectives, various perspectives from around the world, please join me now in giving a warm IEEE welcome to Steve Edwell.
Thank you, Wayne. A bit of a risk letting an Aussie wrap up your conference. I'm sure I won't get the last word. There's a panel session to come. So, yes, I'm operating a little bit outside my comfort zone. My main interest is in designing power pools and economic regulation, but I thought in this forum best to sort of stick to giving you a bit of a worldwide tour through the Australian power industry, and you'll recognise the map there. So there are two major power pools in Australia. On the right-hand side there, you see the National Energy Market. That's about 40,000 kilometres of transmission. It's one of the world's largest, in terms of length, power pools. And over on the west, which is where I'm currently the regulator, you've got the WEM, the Wholesale Electricity Market in Western Australia. Now, both these markets have different designs. If you're interested in electricity markets, the one on the right, the NEM, is an energy-only market, whereas in the west we've got a capacity market. And the area in the grey is covered by a business, a utility I was the chair of a few years back, called Horizon Power. And they have a franchise to provide power to a whole bunch of regional communities, which are mainly habitated by Indigenous Australians, but not totally. And there's 37 individual little microgrids that have traditionally been fueled on diesel fuel that we're now trying to think outside the square and convert all those to renewable energy microgrids. Can I say Australia has got 27 million people. We've got far more kangaroos than people, but the land area is immense. If you compare it to America, mainland America, it's much the same in terms of land area. And I note that you guys have got more people living in California than we have in the whole of the country, so a difference there. The thing about Australia, I think, though, is we really are at, I would say, at the leading edge of this transformation, because what we're doing in both those markets is we're phasing out coal. So coal has been the mainstay of Australian power generation. About 70% historically of all generation has come from coal. And governments and owners of coal, for various reasons, are now phasing that out with pretty strict deadlines. And as you can see from this slide, if you've been to Australia, you will recognise that two things we have got is sun and lots of sand and beach. And we've also got a whole bunch of rooftop solar. Where I live in Perth, there's about 1 house in 2 now with rooftop solar. So what we're doing as a nation is we're phasing out baseload coal. We're replacing it with a whole bunch of intermittency in terms of large solar and large wind farms, and of course a whole bunch of mums and dads are now generators. Indeed, in and around our market, there are 2 terminals which are actually net generators instead of being loads. So we have major problems in terms of reliability. I told a story to a few people during the week that in one September day last year, we had the sunshine and the wind was blowing. It was a fairly mild day. We had an 82% penetration of renewables into the power system. 2 weeks later, we had an overcast day, a cold snap. We had no wind, no sun. We had 20 megawatts from intermittence. So that's the sort of thing that causes an operator to lose sleep. We have the same problems with climate change as you guys do here. As we just saw, the climate is angry down under. And this is just a snapshot of infrastructure that was affected in the last 12 months in Western Australia. As Wayne said, I've been a watcher of climate science for 25, 30 years, ever since the world got into trouble back in the 80s with the ozone layer. And it wasn't so long ago, 5 years ago maybe, that we were all hoping we could keep climate warming, the Earth warming to 1.5 degrees above historic levels. We've lost that. We are clearly, as I read the climate data, we are now in a 2-degree warming planet. And the consequences of that are monstrous. So one of the things that we have to expect in this market, in this industry going forward, is that we are going to have major, major changes with infrastructure being impacted by climate effects, by severe climate effects. On this slide, I've just listed 4 sort of drivers in terms of looking at where grids might evolve from the Australian context. Clearly, we've got to convert grids which have been designed around thermal baseload generation to inverter-based grids. That's sort of like flying an aeroplane with a whole bunch of people on it that you want to keep happy. You can't land the aeroplane, but you've got to change out the instrumentation panel. And when they get to the end of it, which is like 2050, everybody's happy and it's been a smooth flight. That's a task, I'm sure, as you will appreciate. We've got to urgently expand our network because we've got fairly steady load growth, but when you look at electrification, all the businesses across Australia now wanting to electrify. In my market alone, there have been predictions that in the next 15 years, the load will increase by 10 times the load in terms of generation requirements, and up to 60% increase in transmission. We need to, obviously, there's the resilience issue, and one of the things that has happened, of course, in this transformation is markets were designed for steady state. 15 or 25 years ago to 15 years ago. So now with this phase out of baseload into intermittence and all the things that are happening, my view is that electricity markets are just not functioning as the way they were designed. So we are having to make major changes to the way that our electricity market operates, which is an interesting discussion maybe for another time. One of the other interesting things for me back in Oz is in terms of where the grid might end up, is do you follow the traditional electricity grid where you build out transmission, and we've heard a lot about that in this conference, and follow the general trend, even though we all know we've got to do a whole bunch of stuff at the distribution end to integrate renewables. Or do you take another tack, and this is partly driven by resilience, and decentralise your power system? So is there a model where you can just have a whole bunch of DER, all the DER products that we know, batteries on wheels, home energy management systems, rooftop solar, etc., community batteries. Just go for, spend up big bucks on all that and have your system predominantly decentralised. Now, because the whole economy needs to electrify and the loads as a result of industry are going to be so high, you won't get to that model. And we've got to do a whole bunch of stuff to get VPPs at scale into these markets. But it's an interesting paradigm. And there are some people in Australia who are openly pushing for the decentralised model instead of the other model. So one of the policy decisions I think is going to be where on that pendulum do you actually swing between the two. In terms of where the grid might end up in my part of the world, this is a sort of a vision which I put together to try to depict how the grid in Western Australia that we regulate might evolve. Now, this is a vision which we've sort of agreed to with the business, we being the regulator. And what you see there is that little dark green area, Metro Perth, that's where most of the population is. That's going to be, as much as possible, undergrounded power. And it's going to be a very tight-knit meshed network with very, very high levels of digitalisation. So that's the DER hub centre for most of the population. The purple area out to the west there are the more central areas of the grid. These are prodigious distances, by the way. You can fit the UK 10 times into Perth. So not many people, but a whole bunch of long lines. So what we want to do is improve reliability and reduce climate change exposure in those areas by going microgrids, by installing things called standalone power systems. I've got a slide on that in a minute. And then further out, and we haven't quite resolved this yet, is we've got prodigiously good wind resources in the outreaches of our state, very high capacity factors. So the idea is we might be able to capture some of those by setting up renewable energy hubs or renewable energy zones and bring that power to market through transmission. And then, of course, in the middle, the light blue area is sort of a hybrid of all of those. So we have got a vision, but obviously that's got to be put into effect. Just as a quick case study, the business I mentioned I chaired a little while ago, this is the regional business which services an area in the southwest corner of the state called Esperance. Had a major bushfire go through there, wiped out a whole bunch of infrastructure, and the board had to make decisions about whether we would actually rebuild some of these lines, or was there another alternative to save OPEX and maintenance and install local microgrids. And there's a whole bunch of farms in this area where we actually, over time, took out the power line, where they had pretty marginal reliability anyway because they're on the end of a skinny line and all sorts of things happen, trees fall down, birds, etc. So we took those lines down and we've been gradually installing these things called standalone power systems, which are effectively, an 8 kilowatt solar array with a 16 kilowatt battery supported by a 23 kilowatt diesel backup. And what we're finding is that the diesel backup's only being used about 10% of the time. So we're saving cost, we are reducing emissions. Final slide, I won't go through all of these, but these are just some thought pieces I put together in terms of decarbonising the grid. If we want to get to where we want to go and have a smooth landing, if there are ticks in all these boxes as I see it, it'll be happy days. We've got to value flexibility now. What we're finding in WA is we used to have our adequacy target set at a peak, a 10% chance of happening. A POE peak, you might recognise that in your market. We're now finding that our peak loads and our system adequacy problems can happen in the middle of the day. They can happen during the ramp up. So whereas before we used to have enough kit on the ground to satisfy that 1 in 10 year peak, now we're finding we need different types of plant. We need a fast start gas plant, say, or we need a battery to service that ramp up, or we need something for overnight power. So valuing flexibility is going to be a big issue. System planning is easier in our part of the world than it is here because we're just one jurisdiction. But even on the NEM, they're pretty good at sort of holistic system planning. And the final one I just wanted to comment on was affordability. The amount of money that has to go into this transformation is just mind-blowing. Right throughout the world, we've just approved it's a 9% increase per annum in the distribution charge for our business. That doesn't include the cost of additional transmission, and it doesn't include a whole bunch of generation costs through the cost of providing ancillary services, fast frequency response that are all yet to come. At a time when interest rates are high and people in Australia many folk in Australia are under cost pressure. So as a regulator, that's a problem for me, and that's what causes me to lose sleep. So there are some big issues there for us to solve, but from what I've heard at this conference, looks like we're up for it. Thank you.
Great. Thanks very much, Steve. Much appreciated. So as you can imagine, the amount of change that you've heard this week alone is incredible that's happening in the industry. It's really a revolution when you think about it. Everything from energy storage to DERs to offshore wind to solar to electric vehicle charging stations. When I got into the industry in the 1990s, early 90s, we didn't even call them customers, we called them ratepayers, right? And so even that has changed. And the customers are really driving a lot of these changes as well. They're putting Nest thermostats in. They're suddenly installing EV chargers in their garages and so forth. And they're putting rooftop solar on. So we have all of these things happening along with a lot of the challenges that we've heard about this week, supply chain management being one. Another is, of course, the workforce of the future, dealing with that. Power, our infrastructure was made for power to go in one direction. Now it's suddenly bi-directional. It's going in both directions. So we have that challenge. But the biggest challenge, of course, is climate change. And a lot of us are talking about decarbonization through electrification as well. There's been a lot of panels on that this week. By the way, if that's something that interests you, a quick commercial break. January 21st to the 23rd will be our second Grid Edge Technologies Conference and Exhibition. If you like California weather, come back, because it'll be in San Diego, and there'll be more discussion on that topic. But with all of these changes, including electrification and including all the challenges, Steve, from a regulator's standpoint, and you've been here all week listening to the discussions, do you think the regulatory model has to change? And what do you think from a regulator perspective?
Yeah, well, good question. So regulation has basically evolved, Wayne, I think pretty well in all the markets. And I don't know the market here in the US as much as I do as Europe and back home, but we've been regulating in steady state, right? So the technology's been pretty stable, and we've changed the regulation by iterations here and there. We've had 25 years of that. The problem we've got now is the paradigm's totally shifted. We've got all the stuff we've been talking about here. We've got urgency. We've got big spends. So in my view, the regulatory model, and I've been saying this back home, doesn't fit anymore. We need to change. So one example is who takes the risk? What's the allocation of risk between customers, between utilities, and between government? Two is the point I made before that markets really are not up for it. I don't believe that we can get sufficient generation and all this network building in time to go through the normal regulatory process. So there's got to be some intervention, there's got to be some bypassing. So I think regulators have got to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. They've got to be working with their businesses. We've always been striving to get efficiency. So when this thing started, we had, Wayne, in Australia, big fat lazy network businesses, and we just drove costs down. Now what we need to do is think about urgency and outputs and reward those things rather than efficiency. It's a whole new paradigm.
Definitely changed. Any other comments on the regulatory perspective? Or?
No, I mean, the only thing I would say there, Wayne, is, we spent a lot of time talking to the various states, the federal government, DOE, and others. And I think constant communication back and forth and sharing the ideas, understanding what the impacts of policy changes are going to be, and then translating that into dollars, which I do know if you look at Europe, where it's 40 cents a kilowatt hour, that's real money for a lot of people. And we have people today who can't afford to pay their light bill. So if the costs double, how are people going to afford it going into the future? So I think having that dialogue, understanding what those impacts are, is going to be absolutely critical in our future.
Yeah, the dialogue and communication is definitely have to happen.
I'll just add the ability to have that long-term vision and plan and stick to it. The short-termism that happens right now, especially in the United States, whether it's a combination of companies on their quarterly earnings report, or whether it's the political cycles, and regulators are influenced by those political cycles, and having those immediate reactions to those events, I think are not helping our ability to plan for the long term.
Yeah, and I'll just add one thing. I can do many, but one of them. So there's very little incentive for innovation in the utilities industry under the current regulation. So some of the innovative technology will reduce your capex, and that is counterproductive for shareholders. So there need to be a change to incentivize this innovation.
Okay, thank you. So, Catherine, being that Avangrid is part of Iberdrola, it's a large company, headquartered in Spain, locations throughout not only the United States but Europe as well. Are there things that we can learn from Europe in terms of when it comes to transitioning toward a clean energy future, and vice versa for that matter?
Absolutely. Being part of the Iberdrola family has been fascinating, because I get an opportunity to see across the globe different things that are happening from a regulatory perspective, from a technology perspective, and the like. And I do have to shout out not just Europe, but I've got one of my Brazilian colleagues out there, so he can talk a lot about what they're seeing in Brazil with transmission build out as well. But the short answer is yes, there's a lot that we can learn. And some of it is not always, does it translate, but there's a lot that does. And so when I was talking a little bit earlier about changing the topography of the system, that is something we've definitely learned from when we go to Spain. Their reliability is multiples better than it is here in the United States. My Spanish colleagues come and they look at our CAIDI and our SAIFI metrics, and they look at the 100-year-old distribution poles that we have and the substations, and they look at this and they're like, this is the United States? Like, this is third world. Come over to Spain and look at the underground GIS substations, look at the undergrounding of the wires. And some of the interesting things that they have done is really thought about replanning the system so that the entire community benefits from it. So if you're in a more urban area and you reduce the number of substations from 10 down to 6, that's land that you then can redevelop, whether it's for low-income housing or whether it's for parks or something, and that's a net benefit to everybody. So we're trying to think creatively and learn from some of the things that they've done over in Europe. And the converse is they look at some of our regulation that they would like to have some of the regulation, the decoupling that we have up in the Northeast that is somewhat insulating from the load variability, which can drive some poor decision making if you're really tied to that load. So we do try to exchange back and forth.
Great. Thanks, Catherine. And it's organizations like this, right? IEEE PES that brings everybody together, all of the stakeholders. So to use Ken's word earlier, that collaboration can happen. It should almost happen naturally. We have 77 different countries here this week. That's incredible. And an organization like IEEE PES, yes, let's clap. I heard a couple of claps. That's incredible. It's all about that collaboration and coming together. So those of you that have been on panels before, you know I always like to do the lightning round. So we're going to end with the lightning round. And my question today for the lightning round is, and it has to be in just 1 to 3 words, in your opinion, that's why it's the lightning round, and why, in your opinion, what is the biggest challenge for the grid of tomorrow? So Catherine, I'd like you to start if you could, please.
Affordability, how are we going to pay for it?
Michael?
Maintaining grid with all the changes on both on generation and loads.
Ken?
Speed and scale.
Steve?
Can I take 4 words?
Sure. Catherine only said 1 or 2, so you can take her 2.
Well, I think it's getting there. I really think it's getting to the grid of tomorrow because we've got to worry about today.
Great. And for those of you that also know me from my old times of working for a European company, I'm very much on time. So it's now 4 o'clock. Please join me in giving our panelists a big round of applause. And I'll say the last few words as moderator. All of us in this room are a part of making this change happen, whether it's workforce challenges or sustainability challenges. And I will, at this time, turn the stage over to they're going to do the awards now, right? We're going to do the awards. So Manuel and Joe and Eric and the entire local organizing team from Southern California Edison has done a great job in putting together this event. Let's give them one big round of applause again.
Some bottom so that the dancer just won't hide.
Hello. All right. All right, folks. Thanks for sticking around. Last but not least, we are going to give out some awards for the student poster contest. So this happened last night during the regular poster session. If you had a chance to check them out, it was really impressive. So without further ado, here we go. Let's start with the graduate students. So let's see. Okay, so for the graduate student poster contest, third prize goes to Tanzim Jim Hassan from the University of North Dakota. So if you are here, please come on up, claim your certificate. All right, the poster was titled Multi-Stage Hybrid Machine Learning Model for UAV Battery Drain Estimation. All right, here we go. All right. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations. All right, very good. And second place goes to Stephen Poor, University of Kentucky, for the poster titled Virtual Power Plant Control of Heat Pump Water Heaters and EVs on Distribution Feeders with Thousands of Residential Loads. Stephen. Is Stephen here? He's in the restroom? All right. Stephen, if you can hear me. No need to rush. All right. We'll circle back. First prize presented to Rosemary Alden, University of Kentucky, for the poster titled Combine Experimental and Synthetic Data with Example, with example simulations on large-scale distribution test feeders for power quality analysis. All right, thanks. And that wraps up the. You just let me know when Stephen gets back. Yeah, just have him come up and. Oh, that's still Stephen's. Okay. No worries. Okay, on to the undergraduate category. We had a tie for third place. So in no particular order, the first of our third prize winners, Joseph Xerxes Union College for the poster titled PV Module Power Output Forecasting. Joseph, are you here? Okay. And the other third place winner is Siddhant Dekka, also from Union College, implementation of TSLS ARMA function for power grid stability assessment in microgrids using Simulink. Sid, are you here? Okay. And second place goes to Charles Rivera, University of California, Merced, for the poster titled Demand Response Using Large Language Models and a Multi-Agent Conversation Framework. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. All right, and first place for the undergraduates goes to Owen Campbell, Miami University, for the poster titled Rolling Blackouts and Load Shedding, Machine Learning Optimization. There he is. All right, I see our two third place, our co-winners have arrived, so please come on up. I'll give you your certificates. Again, this was, let's see, coming from the outside in, Siddhant Dekka, Union College. Make sure I have the right one. And Joseph Xerxes, Union College. All right, here you go. We have our final winners here. Graduate Student Poster Contest, second prize, Stephen Poor, University of Kentucky. All right, let's hear one last round of applause for all of our participants, our winners, and all of the volunteers who made this possible. Special shout out to Shannon, Roseanne, Dan, Gianella, all the folks on the LOC and the PES side of things for making this possible. All right, thanks a lot.
Okay, it's time to draw the conference to a close. Boo. Yeah, it's been a wonderful week. The folks in green, please stand up. This is who we have left of the local organizing committee for 2 years. They've worked hard to make Anaheim shine. Awesome job. Started with seeing Disney brought to all of us in the Disneyland Hotel, and just a tremendous job. So proud of all of you. But now it's time to hand it over to our new Acorns, which will grow. I used that same line 2 years ago. But these are our ComEd folks, so they are going to take over what will be the conference in Chicago in 2026. They were at about the 1 yard line in 2020, ready to put on the show, and then that COVID thing happened, right? So they got put in neutral, and they said they were so ready, we can go there Monday and have the conference if y'all want to go, no? All right, so we're going to take a 2-year pause, but we will see you in the Windy City. I'll ask Dan or Marina or Angie, whoever wants to start learning to talk publicly, because they're going to be doing that in a couple of years, to give you a few words here.
All right, thank you, Joe. And I think Acorn's probably the kindest thing you've called me in quite some time. That said, though, again, I want to thank our hosts and the local organizing committee this year for your great hospitality and your mentorship this week. You've put on an incredible show. We're really excited to try to carry the torch, and we got a tough act to follow, but like we say in Chicago, make no small plans. So everybody get ready for a great show in 2026, and we look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you.